Welcome to TechSpace, I'm Jake, and today we're talking about Valve's Steam Deck. Announced July 2021 with a rolling release that started February 2022, the Steam Deck is Valve's first portable gaming computer, and it really feels like the culmination of the last decade's worth of gaming. Take Valve's history, for example. In 2013, they announced Steam Machines, which promised to combine PC and home console gaming. Alongside that, they announced the Steam Link and the Steam Controller, and you can really feel bits and pieces of all of those together when you use the Steam Deck. Looking outside of Valve, there's the obvious comparison to the Nintendo Switch, and I'm also reminded of playing Skyrim on Razer's Edge Pro tablet device back in CES in 2013. Outside of those comparisons and a host of other portable handheld PCs, when I'm actually using the Steam Deck, I get big Vita energy in the best way possible. It almost feels like the Steam Deck meets all of the expectations people had for the Vita, while also capturing everything the Vita excelled at. When Sony announced the Vita, they built it as a portable home console. They marketed it with Vita versions of their biggest titles, Uncharted, Little Big Planet, Killzone, Resistance. But the problem were they were that, Vita versions. They were stripped down versions of the originals. There was no way that they could possibly meet the expectations of these big giant franchises on a device like this. Now, don't get me wrong, the Vita had some excellent big budget titles. I mean, Persona 4 Golden and Gravity Rush and Tearaway all come to mind. But where the Vita really excelled was in its PC indie ports. I racked up hours of Ollie Ollie and Spelunky and Rogue Legacy and Hotline Miami. It felt like the Vita was the perfect destination for indie games like this. And that's where the Steam Deck comes in. Can you play big games like Elden Ring and Control? Absolutely. Are there compromises? Yeah, you bet. That being said, it can play those big titles, and it plays them pretty well out of the box. But where the Steam Deck really shines is with the indie games. But before we get into the meat of this review, let's talk about specs. The Steam Deck has a 7-inch 800p touchscreen display, a custom AMD Zen 2 CPU, and AMD RDNA 2 graphics. It's got 16 gigs of RAM. It's got 3 SKUs of storage, starting at 64 gigs at $399, and it goes up to 512 gigs of storage. It has a 40 watt-hour battery, and it's a chunk. It's 11.7 inches wide, 4.6 inches tall, and just under a pound and a half. Telling you its dimensions doesn't really do it justice on how big this thing really is, so here's a quick montage of it up against some classic handheld consoles for scale. Despite its size, it's really comfortable to me. I mean, I feel like the buttons are in a great spot. I don't have to awkwardly hold it to move between the face buttons and the joysticks. I feel the triggers and shoulder buttons are easy to hit and have a good amount of travel. And I even like the touchpads on the front, especially in desktop mode. I think the thing that surprised me the most about this wasn't the buttons or the travel, but actually how well the weight is distributed. It feels very comfortable, it's deceptively light. I mean, I can play this thing in bed, which is not something I was expecting to be able to do when I saw pictures of it for the first time. And the only buttons on this thing I don't care for are the back paddles. I've got some commands set up in desktop mode for them, but in games, it's just a little too hard to depress for me, so I usually just have those turned off. Performance is what you'd expect out of something in this package. Older games and indies run flawlessly at 60 frames, and beefier titles hit about 30 to 45 out of the box. And you can tweak any setting to optimize for performance over visual fidelity. And boy, can you tweak. On top of the fact that this is a PC, and so it's running PC versions of games, and you can go in and tweak any graphic settings you want within the game. But Valve's also implemented a performance tool that's a system-wide overlay. If you want to go in and lock frame rate to 45 through the entire system, you can do that. If you want to set up power limiters, you can do that too. And even just this week, Valve's updated the performance tool to let you set game-by-game profiles, so you can really get exactly the performance you want every single time. Battery life is also kind of exactly what you'd expect. I mean, bigger games are going to demand more power. I've seen anywhere from an hour 45 to 7 hours of estimated battery life, and it really is going to depend on all the factors we talked about before. What are you willing to tweak? What are you willing to sacrifice to get more battery life? Before we wrap up, I want to take a quick moment and talk about Useless Apparel. Useless Apparel is a brand that I've been working on for about a decade. The initial idea was simple. It was a joke. What if an article of clothing had something that was manufactured intentionally wrong, therefore rendering that piece of the clothing useless? So the first idea was a pocket tee with the pocket upside down. But as time went on and I grew, the brand kind of grew alongside it. It was no longer about the joke of it being upside down, it was about using that joke for something more. So this comes in two big pieces. Number one is artists. When speaking to my art friends, a lot of the time they tell me they're made to feel useless because of the art that they make, or their own custom pieces that they've made, they've come up with themselves that represent them as people, get ignored because they get commissioned to make art in other people's styles or other kinds of content. And that's what I want out of Useless Apparel. I want it to be a platform for artists to share their unique art in their own style, express their particular voice. So when an artist partners with us, they will get their own page and their own storefront for their art, and a portion of every sale of their artwork will go to that artist. And that brings me to part two. In addition to getting a kickback themselves, the artist will also get to pick a foundation or charity that they truly believe in, and a portion of every sale from their collection will go to that charity. For example, right now there are two collections live on uselessapparelco.com, one of which is the outline, which is a very minimal take on the brand. A portion of every sale from the outline goes to the Trevor Project. And then there's some art that I've made myself, like the one I'm wearing, which is the Ruth, or one of my favorites, which is the Gwen. A portion of every sale of these will go towards the Asian Mental Health Collective. So that's Useless Apparel. It is a brand that means a lot to me and that I hope will do a lot of good. That's the intent behind it. I want to be able to simultaneously support artists and the foundations that they believe in. So if you're an artist and are interested in getting your unique voice out there on clothing, I'll leave a link in the description for my contact page. Or if you're interested in supporting me and this channel, or the Asian Mental Health Collective, or the Trevor Project, you can go to uselessapparelco.com, and if you use offer code TECH, you'll get 10% at checkout. In these reviews, wrap-ups are going to consist of the standouts, both good and bad, and we're going to start with the bad. The whole user experience kind of feels like a big beta test. Now, it has gotten better in the month or so I've had the device, but there's just a lot of jank here and there. For example, when I'm in the store and I'm going through the recommended section, it will jump 3 or 4 rows every single time, and has done that since launch. The Steam button doesn't always register, requiring multiple presses just to exit a game, and that's assuming the game's going to even exit. There have been several times where it just hangs up and I have to restart the entire system in order for it to close the game. And there are games that are verified that just don't launch right. I mean, it took 3 installs and uninstalls to get Dragon Quest XI to run. And even Arkham City, a game that has been verified since I got my machine, every time I launch it, the audio plays, but I get no video. And I've uninstalled and reinstalled a dozen times, system update after system update, still nothing. And that takes me to the verification process. On a positive note, there's a lot of games verified, and that list of games is continuing to grow day by day. But there are tens of thousands of games in the Steam store, and Valve, rightfully so, wants all those games to perform as you'd expect for them to be verified. And that's a lot of games to go through to make sure they work perfect from start to finish. And there are a lot of games in my library that aren't verified. There's a lot that are playable, and there's a lot that are unplayable. And there's even more that are untested. So that's just to say that just because you have a game in your library doesn't mean it's going to work on the Steam Deck out of the box. Plus, there are games that may never work on Steam Deck. Games like Destiny 2 and PUBG and Fortnite. These games probably won't come to Steam Deck anytime soon without any sort of workaround. I mean, Bungie said they have no plans to support the Steam Deck. Their anti-cheat software doesn't run well on Linux, and they don't want to open the floodgates to a whole bunch of potential cheaters. And while I understand that to some degree, I do think the Steam Deck and devices like it are going to be a pretty popular device category, and that's a large group of people to alienate. Now, there are workarounds for these. There are services like Xbox Game Streaming and Stadia, and in my experience, they've worked pretty well for games like this. But I also have gigabit internet, and even then it wasn't perfect. So if you don't have the fastest speeds available, your mileage may vary. Lastly, there's the fan. And simply put, it's loud. I mean, it's really loud. It's like launch PS4 in your hands loud. It's so loud that I've started intentionally playing certain games when I'm around people that I know won't kick the fan on. I mean, seriously, listen to this. Okay, on to the good things, the things that really make me love the Steam Deck. First off is the library. I've been collecting games for around a decade now, and I'm about at 700 games. And of those, there are hundreds that I've never played, whether that's because I was playing another game and I forgot about it, or I was waiting for a Switch port, or it just wasn't a game I wanted to sit down at my desk and play. And that's where the beauty of the Steam Deck is for me. I've never had a brand new console that I've opened up and had a library of games I've never played before. Just in the last month of having this thing, I've started about a dozen new games that some of them are newer, some of them I've been sitting on for a couple years, and it took having a device like this to really get me to jump into some of these very good games that I just wasn't feeling at the moment. The second reason why I love this ties into the library, but it's the portability of it. I recently took this on vacation, and I'll be honest, my 3-hour flight disappeared. On my flight out, I started my 4th playthrough of Persona 4 Golden, and next thing I knew, we were about to land. It's a similar story on the way back. I started Pyre, which is a game that I've wanted to play for a long time. I mean, I adored Hades. It's maybe one of my top 5 games of all time, and I liked Bastion and Transistor, but I never played Pyre because it was stuck on PC. And now I had an opportunity to play it, and I adore it. I spent the entire flight playing that and Rogue Legacy 2. In addition to traveling, I have an 8-hour round-trip drive that I make every week, and on my drive there and back, I always stop to charge my car. And this thing has changed that trip for me. Previously, I'd just sit and doom scroll Twitter for a half hour, waiting for my car to get done charging. And now I can do a quick run of Vampire Survivors, or continue to work my way through Unsighted. It is a different trip for me. I mean, I'll look down, start playing, and I'll look back up and my car's done charging. It's fantastic. I mentioned earlier that I was able to play this in bed, and it has been a delight to wind down my day with a quick game of Madden or a relaxing game like Spiritfarer. I just can't stress enough how the portability of this, along with the massive library, has changed my gaming habits. I'm playing more games and I'm playing more of them. I'm able to get sucked into more games than I would be able to if I was bound to my TV or my desk. So that pretty much sums up my thoughts on the Steam Deck. It's a frustrating and janky console that has genuinely changed how I play video games. And at $400 for a starting price, it's a pretty enticing entry into PC gaming. But what do you think? Are you going to order one? Do you have one already? Are you still on the wait list? I want to hear from you because my experience is very specific to me, and these things might not hit the same for you as it does for me. I also want to know if you want to see more on the Steam Deck. I mean, this thing is huge. I could do a video on just streaming, or as an emulation device, or if it could replace your computer. I mean, leave a comment below if you want to see a video like that. Well, that does it for this one. Please do the YouTube thing and like, subscribe. It really does help the channel, and I genuinely appreciate it. Anyway, I've been Jake, and I'm really excited to talk to you in the next one. Quit.